Imagine a highly confidential, youth-led document outlining a step-by-step, totally tech-driven plan to completely erase the inherited borders of an entire continent by the year 2050.
Right. No more modern nation states as we know them today.
Exactly, just 143 sovereign tribes, 15 diaspora nations, and like $120 billion in weaponized global cash.
And a highly organized digital army orchestrating the entire thing.
It sounds completely like the plot of a near-future geopolitical thriller, honestly.
Oh, totally. But you are actually describing a very real, highly structured manifesto and operational playbook.
Welcome to a brand new deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, the stack of sources you brought us today is really unlike anything we usually look at.
It really is. We are entirely unpacking a framework referred to as the 143 system, which basically serves as the foundational architecture for a movement calling itself Ubumwe Africa.
Right, and the ultimate, explicitly stated goal of this material is the creation of a super federal Africa.
And they aren't viewing this as some abstract, distant utopia to be achieved in 300 years.
No, not at all. The timeline is super aggressive. I mean, they're projecting massive global power shifts within the next 2 decades.
Relying heavily on modern technology.
Yeah, technology, strategic resource cartels, and an entirely new definition of what a border actually is.
Okay, but before we jump into the actual mechanics of how they plan to pull this off, I feel like I need to pause and set a very clear baseline for you, our listener.
Definitely. That's super important here.
Because given the highly political, decolonial, and frankly revolutionary nature of these documents...
They propose massive geopolitical shifts.
Right, exactly. And they refer extensively to deep historical grievances. So I want to be incredibly explicit here.
Right.
We're looking at these documents strictly as objective analysts. We aren't taking sides.
Right. We are not endorsing the political views, nor are we judging the ideologies contained within the text.
Our sole mission today is literally just to unpack the fascinating architecture, the underlying economic game theory, and, the step-by-step methodologies contained in the source material you provided.
That framing is so essential. We're really just here to map out the how and the why of this document.
Yeah. We're going to explore how the authors of this movement plan to shift Pan-Africanism from what they kind of derisively call a nostalgic sentiment into a rigorous scientific methodology.
Yeah, we have to look at their unique political structures, their plans for dictating global mineral prices, and their incredibly modern approach to grassroots organizing.
Let's actually start right there with that phrase, scientific methodology.
Okay, yeah.
Because early on in the manifesto, the authors draw a very hard line in the sand regarding how Pan-Africanism has been handled historically.
They really do. They basically argue that for the last 50 to 60 years, the movement has been treated as little more than an emotional connection.
Right, a hopeful dream, a collection of slogans you might put on a t-shirt or chant at a rally.
Exactly. The text insists that feeling a sense of togetherness is no longer sufficient. In fact, they say it might even be a liability if it doesn't lead to structural change. They use this striking phrasing, demanding that the challenges of division must be dissected with the precision of a surgeon.
Wow, the precision of a surgeon.
Yeah. It is a fundamental rejection of passive idealism.
Yeah.
They are demanding an engineering mindset.
They're looking for load-bearing walls, basically, not just a beautiful facade.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy. It's like they're saying that for the last century, Pan-Africanism has been writing beautiful poetry about a house you wish you lived in.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You can talk endlessly about how nice the house would be and how much you deserve the house, but a poem doesn't pour a concrete foundation.
It definitely doesn't.
So this document is them essentially hiring an architect, drawing up the CAD files, and calculating the exact load-bearing capacity of the bricks.
Yeah, and the authors argue that this structural approach is absolutely necessary because of what they call the wound of centuries. The wound of centuries, that's a heavy phrase. It is. And they don't just wave a hand at history in a generalized way either.
Wow.
They're highly specific about what was lost and how it needs to be rebuilt.
Okay, so they're grounding their modern goals in specific historical baselines of highly functioning civilizations.
Exactly. They explicitly cite the pyramids of Kemet, the massive stone walls of Great Zimbabwe, and the sprawling empires of Mali and Songhai.
Right, they mention Hausa traders, Igbo artisans, Akan kings, Shona sculptors.
Yeah, and they are doing this to establish a premise.
They're saying, look, Complex, sovereign, large-scale systems are our baseline. They are not a new invention for us.
That is the core of their historical argument. Citing those specific empires allows them to frame the current fragmentation and underdevelopment of the continent not as a natural state of affairs.
Right, or some inherent flaw.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as a deliberate engineered outcome. They argue this current state is the direct result of external manipulation, invasion, and capitalism.
So they're saying it wasn't an accident.
Not at all. The text asserts that European and Arab invaders didn't just divide the land with arbitrary borders and steal physical resources.
What else did they do?
They fundamentally poisoned the collective mindset through miseducation.
Okay, that concept of miseducation is a huge pillar of their philosophy.
Oh, absolutely massive.
And they don't just throw that word around, right? They are building on a very specific lineage of thought.
Yeah, they cite a pantheon of influential scholars to anchor this scientific methodology.
So who do they actually bring up?
Well, the scholars they select are highly intentional. First, they cite Chancellor Williams, specifically referencing his work documenting the deliberate destruction of Black civilization.
Deliberate destruction.
Right. Williams' theory is crucial to the Ubumwe blueprint because it argues that the fall of these great empires wasn't accidental, it was a systematic dismantling.
Okay, and who else?
Next, they bring in Carter G. Woodson to explain that mental miseducation.
Which is what exactly? Like psychological conditioning?
Yeah, pretty much. It's the insidious process where a colonized people are systematically taught, through schooling and culture, to despise their own history and revere their colonizers.
Okay, so if you're listening to this and wondering how a modern political manifesto ties into a textbook from the 1930s, that is exactly the link.
Exactly. The blueprint is arguing that you cannot build a new geopolitical system if the citizens operating it are still running on the psychological software of the people who colonize them.
Man, that's intense.
It is, and they combine that psychological argument with a brutal economic one, invoking Walter Rodney.
Right, Rodney's work on capitalism and underdevelopment.
Yeah, they rely heavily on his evaluations of how capitalist exploitation didn't just extract wealth, but actively and intentionally underdeveloped the continent for 5 centuries.
So the argument is that Europe's development was directly financed by Africa's underdevelopment.
Precisely. And finally, they lean on Frantz Fanon, whose work on the psychology of the oppressed calls for a radical, almost visceral break from the psychological violence of colonialism.
Okay, but knowing the history of underdevelopment and psychological violence still doesn't build the house.
No, it doesn't.
It just tells you why the old house collapsed. And following that architectural logic, the blueprint asserts that you cannot build this new superfederal Africa on a faulty foundation.
Right. And in their view, the current borders.
Like the actual lines on the map defining modern nation states?
Yeah, the actual lines. They view those as the faulty foundation.
Okay, so they want to get rid of them completely.
Yes. The authors view the modern borders of African states as inherited colonial cages.
Inherited colonial cages.
Wow. They argue that you cannot achieve total sovereignty by operating within the exact geographic boundaries drawn by European powers at the Berlin Conference in 1884.
So to achieve their goals, they literally have to invent an entirely new political operating system.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, is an incredibly dangerous and fragile proposition, historically speaking.
Oh, without a doubt.
When you start talking about erasing borders, you're usually talking about decades of catastrophic conflict.
Usually, yes. But their proposed solution to this is what they call the Ubumwe Africa Covenant.
Okay, so this is the actual governance model.
Right. And it fundamentally strips power away from the modern nation-state.
Like a Nigeria, a Kenya, or a South Africa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes power from those entities and reassigns it to an assembly of 143 sovereign entities.
Okay, this is where the political science of the document gets incredibly intricate and, frankly, completely radical.
It really does. Those 143 seats are divided into 2 distinct categories.
Which are?
128 continental sub-Saharan ethnic peoples.
Which they refer to as tribes or indigenous nations, right?
Yes, and 15 diaspora nations.
Okay, wait.
The foundational premise of the covenant is that true power and sovereignty belong to the ethnic group and the people, not the geographic state.
Okay, I have to stop and push back on the sheer logistics of this.
Go for it.
How do you even define the exact borders of 128 ethnic tribes after centuries of urbanization, migration, and intermarriage?
That is exactly the right question to ask.
Like, If you have millions of people from different ethnic backgrounds living in massive modern metropolitan hubs like Lagos or Nairobi,
Yeah.
how do you suddenly carve that up into distinct tribal sovereignties without creating total chaos?
Well, that is one of the most glaring vulnerabilities in the practical application of this blueprint.
It seems impossible.
The text relies heavily on historical ethnic homelands, but as you pointed out, modern demography doesn't map cleanly onto ancient tribal borders.
Right. So what's their workaround?
The document seems to suggest a form of decentralized, identity-based citizenship rather than strictly geographic citizenship.
Identity-based citizenship. Okay.
But the administrative friction of separating 128 intertwined ethnic groups into distinct sovereign voting blocks
Right.
would be monumental.
Absolutely monumental. And the population disparities between these 143 seats are massive, too.
Oh, huge.
The text notes that the Hausa group has roughly 85 to 90 million people. Meanwhile, a smaller group like the Endau has maybe 1 million people. If every group gets one seat in this new council, how do you prevent an 89 million person discrepancy from completely gridlocking the entire federation?
Well, the central problem of any federation is balancing the power of the many against the rights of the few.
Right, like the Senate versus the House in the U.S.
Exactly. But their proposed solution is a highly structured, tiered veto system.
A tiered veto system, how does that work?
Every single nation gets one seat and one voice.
Right.
But they introduce tiers based on population size.
Okay.
Tier 1 consists of the largest demographic groups, and they hold full individual veto power over the council's decisions.
So a massive group can unilaterally stop a piece of legislation they just don't like?
Yes,
They can.
that seems like a recipe for nothing ever getting done.
It could be. But then you have Tier 2, which consists of medium-sized groups.
Do they get a veto?
A Tier 2 group does not have an individual veto. Instead, the document outlines a formula where 5 Tier 2 groups must combine their leverage to equal 1 full veto.
Okay, let's play out a hypothetical to see how this actually works.
Let's say the Central Council wants to propose a massive continent-wide infrastructure project, like a high-speed rail network.
Okay, great example.
But it's going to require a massive federal land concession. A Tier 1 group could just look at the map, decide the rail line doesn't benefit them enough, and immediately veto the whole thing.
They absolutely could.
Yeah.
But the Tier 2 groups have a totally different calculus.
Right.
If a single medium-sized group opposes the rail line, they can't stop it alone. They are forced by the system to go to 4 other medium-sized groups and negotiate.
Ah, okay, so they have to build a coalition.
Exactly. They have to say, like, if you help us block this rail line, we will support your initiative on agricultural subsidies.
So it mathematically forces collaboration and diplomacy among the smaller entities.
Yes, while preventing the absolute largest groups from just steamrolling the assembly.
And on top of that veto system, standard decisions in this council require a 75% majority to pass.
Yep, 75%.
I mean, that is an incredibly high bar for any legislative body. It basically ensures that only the most broadly beneficial, highly compromised legislation ever makes it through.
It's totally designed to be a consensus-forcing mechanism. But the architects of this blueprint clearly recognize that even with a 75% majority requirement and a tiered veto system,
People are going to get mad.
exactly, a federation of this size is bound to generate deep resentments. Groups will eventually feel marginalized, so they built in an exit clause.
The text explicitly states, freedom builds trust.
Yeah, that's their motto for it.
And the mechanism for that freedom is that any nation can just leave the federation.
Yes. It requires a 60% local referendum within that specific tribe or group, followed by a 5-year notice period.
5 years, that's a long off-ramp.
By establishing a legal, standardized off-ramp, they're trying to defuse the exact kind of violent separatist movements and civil wars that have historically plagued post-colonial states.
Oh, that makes sense. If a marginalized group knows they have a constitutional right to leave peacefully, they're theoretically more willing to stay at the negotiating table.
Exactly. The 5-year notice period acts as a cooling-off mechanism, preventing rash decisions based on temporary political anger while allowing time to untangle complex economic ties.
Okay, but the inclusion of the diaspora is where this model completely breaks my brain.
I knew we'd get to this.
We have 15 diaspora nations sitting on this council. We're talking about massive populations, like 120 million Afro-Brazilians,
Right.
45 million African Americans, 12 million Haitians, 12 million Jamaicans. They are given full seats and veto power alongside the continental tribes.
Yes, they are.
If I'm a citizen living in Brooklyn or Rio de Janeiro, why on earth should I have a voting say over a trade agreement happening in West Africa?
It's a huge leap.
Doesn't that invite massive resentment from the people actually living on the continent?
It is a radical reimagining of political geography that completely severs the concept of national sovereignty from physical landmass.
Totally severs it.
The text treats shared historical identity and the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade as a tangible political bond equal to a shared border.
Wow.
But you are absolutely right to point out the friction. Granting legislative power over continental affairs to people who live an ocean away, who don't pay local taxes or suffer the immediate consequences of local policies, is an immense vulnerability.
So why do it? Why take the risk of alienating the continental population by giving the diaspora so much power?
Because the blueprint views the diaspora as the crucial, indispensable financial engine for the entire revolution.
Ah, so it's about the money.
They aren't giving the diaspora a seat purely out of historical solidarity or sentimentality. It is a transactional necessity.
The diaspora holds the capital required to actually build the superfederation.
Exactly. Which brings us to the economic strategy of the blueprint, what the text calls the economic sword.
The economic sword. Okay, so if the 143 seats are the political architecture, the economic sword is how they plan to fund the construction and defend the perimeter. And the bedrock of this economic strategy is a concept they call 80% eternal sovereignty.
To understand why this is so revolutionary, you kind of have to look at how modern, resource-rich nation-states usually operate.
Okay, lay it out for me.
In many traditional nationalized economies, a central government in the capital claims ownership of all natural resources.
Yeah.
They extract the oil, the gold, the cobalt,
Right.
they sell it, and they theoretically redistribute the wealth back to the provinces.
But historically, that centralized model has led to massive corruption.
Absolutely massive.
The wealth gets trapped in the capital or offshored by politicians, and the local communities living right on top of the resource mines just remain impoverished.
Yeah, that's the tragic reality. So the Ubumwe blueprint attempts to completely invert that dynamic.
With the 80% rule.
Right. The covenant legally guarantees that individual tribes keep 80% of the revenue generated from their local resources.
Whether that is lithium, oil, arable land, or rare earth minerals.
Exactly. It is, as the text notes, locked in stone. No central federal authority can ever claim more than 20% of a local nation's wealth.
I mean, that fundamentally shifts the incentive structure.
How so?
If I know my community gets to keep 80% of the value of the cobalt we mine, I am heavily incentivized to develop that industry and protect it.
Exactly.
And that remaining 20% isn't just a vague slush fund for the federal council, right? The document is obsessively meticulous about how that slice is divided up.
Super meticulous. The breakdown of that 20% federal share is highly specific.
What are the numbers?
30% goes to continental infrastructure like roads and power grids. 25% funds the centralized defense army. 15% goes to broader economic investment.
Okay, so that's 70% of the federal budget.
Right. Then 10% is allocated back to the diaspora. 10% funds technological innovation. 5% covers administrative government costs, and the last 5% is held in reserve for emergencies.
It's a highly structured taxation model, but retaining local wealth is only half of the economic equation.
Yet the ambition of this document scales up rapidly when they talk about how this 143-member federation interacts with the rest of the global economy.
Right, because their broader goal is the creation of a minerals cartel.
Yes. By unifying 143 resource-rich entities under one economic covenant, they intend to act as a singular, monolithic negotiating bloc.
Which gives them insane leverage.
They want to dictate the global prices for critical resources. We're talking about the cobalt necessary for electric vehicle batteries, the platinum, the gold.
So by controlling the supply chain at the point of origin, what do they project?
They project they can generate over $932 billion in revenue by 2060.
Wait, $932 billion.
Yep. They are essentially trying to create an OPEC for critical tech minerals.
The text is incredibly aggressive here. They talk about ending the era of begging for IMF loans.
Yeah, they want total financial independence.
And the strategy is to leverage this cartel to establish their own currency, the Afro, which would be backed by this unprecedented unification of natural resource wealth.
Exactly. And the blueprint projects that by 2050, this combined system will generate a $27 trillion economy.
$27 trillion.
Making the Afro the strongest currency on the planet.
But, projecting a $27 trillion economy in 2050 doesn't solve the problem of 2026.
No, it certainly doesn't.
To bridge the gap between their current reality and that future goal, they need immediate, highly liquid capital. They need leverage today.
And this is exactly where the diaspora's power comes into play.
The blueprint highlights a massive figure. The global diaspora currently sends roughly $120 billion a year in remittances back to the continent.
$120 billion every year.
Right now, that money is entirely decentralized. It's millions of individual transactions.
Yeah.
It's a nurse in London sending a few £100s back to her parents in Lagos. It's a cab driver in New York sending money through Western Union to his brother in Accra.
It is a massive flow of capital, but it lacks structural intent.
Until now.
Right. The Ubumwe blueprint proposes weaponizing that $120 billion.
Weaponizing remittances? That is so wild.
The strategy is to organize the diaspora to strategically redirect those remittances exclusively to what the text calls green nations.
Okay, let's break down what a green nation is, because this is the crux of their leverage.
A green nation, or a green zone, is any local tribal entity or region that has officially adopted the Ubumwe Covenant.
So if a local leadership council agrees to the 143 system and pledges allegiance to the Federation, they get the green light.
Exactly. The diaspora is then instructed to route their investment and remittance capital exclusively into those compliant zones.
Oh man, this is where the strategy becomes completely ruthless.
It really does.
Put yourself in the shoes of that 28-year-old nurse living in London. She usually sends £200 a month back to her family.
Right.
This blueprint is asking her to use a proprietary encrypted app to route that money. But what if her family lives in a red zone?
Like a region where the local government refuses to join the covenant.
Yeah. Is the movement actually asking her to withhold money from her own family to force political compliance?
Yes, that is exactly the implication. And it is the most controversial mechanism in the entire document.
That's crazy.
It is activist investing on a geopolitical scale. But the collateral damage is highly personal. They are essentially organizing a grassroots economic blockade against old structures.
By starving non-compliant nations of foreign capital exchange, while simultaneously enriching the ones that join the Federation.
Exactly. They intend to force the collapse of the legacy nation-states.
Because a modern nation-state relies heavily on those foreign exchange reserves to stabilize its currency and import goods.
Yep.
If you suddenly choke off billions of dollars from a specific government, their currency devalues, inflation spikes, and the state is forced to the negotiating table.
The diaspora isn't using military force. They are using liquidity as a weapon.
It is a profound application of asymmetrical leverage, and they pair this macroeconomic pressure with hyper-targeted microeconomic initiatives.
Right, like the Billionaire Builder Program or the BBP.
The BBP is fascinating because it is unapologetically elite.
Oh, very elite.
The deliberate goal is to mint 100 new Black billionaires by incubating specific industries like tech, agriculture, energy.
They want to systematically create world-competing titans of industry who are loyal to the covenant.
But to prevent those new billionaires from just becoming a new class of oligarchs who exploit the population, the system simultaneously establishes a universal basic income floor.
Yeah, the text mandates a yearly dividend of over $200 per citizen, paid out from that 20% federal resource tax.
So it's a dual approach. Engineer massive wealth at the absolute top to compete globally and guarantee a baseline of survival at the bottom.
Exactly.
It all sounds incredibly logical on paper. If you have the political seats mapped out and you have the economic cartel generating trillions, you have a functional government.
But the authors of the blueprint argue that functional government is not the same thing as true sovereignty.
Right.
You can rewrite the Constitution and you can print a new currency. But if the citizens operating the system still carry the psychological damage of the past, the system will eventually collapse from within.
Which brings us to Section 4 of the blueprint. Mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
The text asserts that a literal spiritual cleansing is required. You can't just change the laws, you have to change the mind.
And the mechanism they propose for this psychological overhaul is the establishment of centers of light, or CLI Temples.
So they want to build 143 of these centers.
Exactly, one for every single nation represented in the covenant.
When I first read CLI Temples, I assumed it was just a metaphor for, like, a university or a think tank.
Most people would.
But the text is very explicit about the spiritual nature of these centers. This isn't just secular education. It is a mandatory 9-month decolonial program.
What's fascinating is how they weave together radical modern economics with ancient spiritual practices. The curriculum at the CLI Temples is designed to be a synthesis of true history, the operational rules of the 143 system, and specific ancient Kemetic rites.
Okay, I need you to explain these Kemetic rites because the document drops these terms assuming the reader understands them. They specifically mention the rites of Ma'at, Anubis, and Bastet. Why are they resurrecting the spiritual framework of ancient Egypt Kemet and applying it to a 21st century geopolitical movement?
Well, they are using Kemet as a unifying cultural anchor.
Okay.
Instead of adopting the religious frameworks introduced by colonizers, they are reaching back to one of the earliest, most universally recognized symbols of African architectural and spiritual supremacy.
That makes sense.
The specific rites serve functional psychological purposes. The rite of Ma'at represents truth, balance, and cosmic justice. They apply this to modern law and ethics within the Federation.
What about Anubis?
Anubis represents protection and the guarding of boundaries. This is applied to their cybersecurity and physical military defense.
Oh, that's clever. And Bastet.
And Bastet represents joy, art, and culture. This is used to foster social cohesion and celebrate the diverse artistic outputs of the 143 nations.
It's basically an attempt to create a standardized psychological operating system.
Yeah.
But the scale of what they are attempting is staggering. The stated goal of these temples is to produce 500,000 decolonial leaders annually.
Which is an industrial approach to spirituality. They are attempting to systematically re-educate the populace on a massive scale to ensure the ideological survival of the Federation.
So they want 500,000 people a year graduating with a unified understanding of Ma'at, the 80-20 economic rule, and the historical theories of Walter Rodney.
That's the plan.
I have to challenge the feasibility of this. Can you actually mass produce a spiritual awakening?
It's highly doubtful.
You are talking about pulling 500,000 adults out of the workforce for 9 months every year to undergo a decolonial boot camp.
Yeah, the logistics alone are terrifying.
The housing, feeding, and standardizing a curriculum for 500,000 people across diverse linguistic and cultural zones seem completely paradoxical to the idea of organic spiritual growth.
It is highly paradoxical.
Yeah.
Historically, when states attempt to mandate ideological or spiritual purity on an industrial scale, it often devolves into authoritarianism or creates hollow performative compliance. Right. The blueprint assumes that the shared trauma of the wound is enough to make this education eagerly accepted. But the administrative reality of processing 500,000 people annually through a 9-month program is one of the most fragile points in the entire plan.
And alongside the spiritual defense, they outline a very robust, highly structured physical defense, right? The Army of the 143.
Yes.
They are calling for 2 million active personnel and 25 million in reserves. But there is a strict philosophical caveat attached to this military force?
Yes, the document stresses repeatedly that this army is strictly structured as defenders, never oppressors.
Never oppressors.
Right. The authors are acutely aware of the history of military dictatorships and coups that have destabilized post-colonial states. To prevent the army of the 143 from turning against its own people, the military is intentionally decentralized.
Okay, explain how that decentralization works in practice, because an army without central command just sounds like a militia.
Well, the Central Federal Council sets the strategic goals, but the salaries, the housing, and the direct loyalties of the soldiers remain tied to their individual 143 nations.
Oh, so the troops are paid by their local tribes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The idea is that a centralized general cannot easily order a coup because the troops are financially and culturally tethered to their local tribes, not the capital.
Their concept of defense also extends beyond physical borders and into the courtroom.
Yes, it does.
A major pillar of this cultural and psychological overhaul is decolonial justice. They plan to set up foreign tribunals to aggressively reclaim over $10 trillion in reparations from Europe, America, and other entities that historically exploited the continent.
$10 trillion.
Yeah, and the guiding phrase they use is no forgiveness without repair.
They view reparations not as a plea for charity, but as a legally binding debt collection process.
Right.
But you have all these massive moving parts, the 143 political seats, the $120 billion remittance blockade, the $27 trillion minerals cartel, the CLI Temples, the decentralized military, the foreign tribunals.
It's so much.
How do you keep it all from collapsing into chaos?
Well, to assure the integrity of the entire system, the blueprint establishes a singular oversight role called the Permanent Guardian.
The Permanent Guardian.
Yeah, it acts as a supreme ethics office. If a nation violates the covenant, say, a local leadership council tries to hoard 90% of their resources instead of the agreed 80%, the Guardian has the authority to lower their flag.
And lowering the flag isn't just symbolic. It triggers immediate economic and political isolation.
The green zone becomes a red zone.
Exactly. The diaspora remittance app stops allowing transfers to that region. The central infrastructure funds are frozen. The permanent guardian acts as the ultimate circuit breaker for the Federation.
But again, let's test the fragility here. What if a massive Tier 1 group, like the 90 million strong Hausa, violates the covenant?
Okay.
The permanent guardian lowers their flag. Who actually enforces that isolation? If a group is large enough, they might just ignore the guardian and fracture the Federation entirely.
That's a huge risk.
The guardian only has teeth if the rest of the 143 nations are willing to endure the economic pain of enforcing the boycott.
Exactly. The system relies on absolute, unshakable collective trust. And building that trust is why the operational timeline is so methodical.
Right.
The authors don't expect to just announce this system and have everyone comply. If we move into the final section of the blueprint, they lay out their exact, tech-driven, grassroots operational playbook for how they plan to incrementally build this trust and execute the rollout.
This tactical rollout is where the text pivots from ancient philosophy into the ethos of a Silicon Valley startup.
It's totally wild.
They have a highly specific timeline, and it all officially begins on March 1st, 2026.
The contrast here is what makes this document so unique. In one section, you have sweeping, poetic rhetoric about the pyramids of Kemet, the warriors of Zulu, and the spiritual rites of Ma'at.
Yeah.
But the actual day-to-day execution is a completely modern, highly clandestine, and aggressively digital.
The army of the 143 isn't mobilizing with physical weapons. They are starting their revolution on Discord servers using encrypted VPNs.
Right. Let's break down this division of labor, because it is surprisingly granular for a geopolitical manifesto.
Very granular.
They have recruitment heavily compartmentalized into distinct leadership roles. The first role they define is the book club leader.
It sounds almost quaint, honestly.
It does. But their job is critical.
Yeah.
Rapid ideological synchronization.
Okay.
They are tasked with making sure new recruits actually read the foundational texts, Williams, Woodson, Rodney, Fanon, and directly connecting those dense historical theories to the modern mechanics of the Ubumwe Covenant.
They aren't just sitting in a circle in a library, though.
Oh, no.
They're instructed to host monthly discussions on private Discord channels, create highly engaging short-form TikTok videos summarizing the core concepts, and recruit moderation assistants to manage the digital communities.
They are essentially creating decentralized propaganda cells.
Alongside them, you have the technology and security leaders. This role reads like a job description at a cybersecurity firm.
It really does.
Their primary mandate is overseeing the development and deployment of the proprietary remittance app. They manage the architecture of the private Discord server, which is meticulously divided into 143 separate channels, one for each nation in the covenant.
And crucially, they enforce operational security. The document outlines mandatory VPN usage.
Right.
The core organizing team is strictly required to use encrypted communication apps like Signal, and they enforce a strict no real names in public spaces rule to protect the identities of early organizers from state surveillance.
They are also tasked with running a dedicated Truth Squad.
The Truth Squad.
The text explicitly notes that an operation this economically disruptive will face immense digital pushback, likely state-sponsored counterintelligence.
Oh, definitely.
The Truth Squad is designed to rapidly identify and neutralize disinformation, bot networks, and trolls. The blueprint states plainly. Without secure tech, the movement dies. This person keeps you online and safe.
It's an acknowledgement that the first battleground isn't physical territory. It's the information space.
Yep. Next, you have the social media leader. Their job is pure user acquisition and engagement.
They are planning daily, highly coordinated posts across platforms like TikTok and X.
They are leveraging algorithmic trends by running specific hashtag challenges, such as hashtag Ubumwe Africa, hashtag MyFlagellantAfrica, and hashtag Redirect for Unity.
They are coordinating video scripts for influencers, actively managing high-engagement comment sections, and they even outline specific budgets.
Right, utilizing small ad spends of $200 to $600 a week to artificially scale visibility in key demographic zones.
Then you have the boots-on-the-ground geographical organizers. Continental leaders are divided into 5 strategic regions: West, Central, East Horn, Southern, and the Sahel.
Their immediate, most pressing task is to recruit local delegates who have actual influence on the ground.
And importantly, they are responsible for translating the manifesto from English into massive local languages like Hausa, Yoruba, Swahili, Zulu, and Amharic.
Because you cannot build a grassroots movement if the blueprint is only accessible in the language of the colonizer.
Exactly. While the continental leaders focus on local language adoption, the diaspora leaders are building private, invite-only groups in major global hubs: Brazil, the USA, the UK, Haiti, and Jamaica.
The diaspora leaders are hosting what the text calls diaspora power nights.
Power nights.
These events are designed to drive those vital remittance pledges. They are the individuals responsible for sitting down with our hypothetical 28-year-old nurse in London and explaining the brutal math of redirecting her money to the green nations.
They are the tip of the spear for the economic sword.
When you zoom out and look at the timeline they have established for all of this, the aggression of the schedule is breathtaking.
It is so fast.
They plan to launch and pilot the core digital systems and apps in 2026 and 2027.
Right.
They aim to scale the movement and begin applying the economic pressure of the remittance blockades from 2028 to 2030.
And then the referendums.
Yeah, they will push for the local referendums, triggering the exit clauses from the legacy states between 2031 and 2035.
By 2040, they aim to have the full federation of 143 seats seated and functioning.
And by 2050, they project total global power status with a $27 trillion economy.
They're taking the exact playbook of a modern, hyper-growth tech startup beta testing apps, user acquisition funnels, digital community management, strict data security protocols, and scalable ad spends, and using it to orchestrate the collapse of a continental geopolitical structure.
They aren't planning to storm a Capitol building with tanks. They are launching an app, leveraging liquidity, and dominating an algorithm.
It is a completely 21st century approach to nation building.
It truly is a paradigm shift in revolutionary theory. They are attempting to dismantle the legacy structures of globalized colonialism by weaponizing the exact tools of globalized technology.
They fundamentally understand that power in the modern era isn't just about planting a flag in physical land. It is about controlling the flow of information and the flow of capital.
Having dissected this document from every angle, the psychological wound, the 143-seat political architecture, the brutal leverage of the economic cartel, the paradox of mass-producing a spiritual awakening, and the Silicon Valley tactical rollout, we have to take a step back and look at the sheer magnitude of what this blueprint represents.
It's massive.
We are looking at a systematic, highly regimented, and deeply controversial attempt to completely erase inherited borders. They want to replace legacy lines on a map with an ethnically and diaspora-based superfederation.
Yeah.
They are planning to monopolize global tech mineral resources to force economic independence. They intend to weaponize hundreds of billions of dollars in diaspora remittances to literally starve the old system of capital, all while spiritually re-educating millions of people through a massive network of digital and local temples.
It is an incredibly fragile system, full of logistical paradoxes and massive assumptions about human cooperation. The friction of defining those 128 tribal borders, the resentment of diaspora veto power, and the sheer administrative burden of the CLI Temples could easily cause the entire structure to collapse under its own weight.
Absolutely.
But whether it succeeds, fractures, or completely fails, the architectural ambition of the Ubumwe Africa blueprint is a masterclass in massive-scale systems thinking. It is a testament to the rapidly evolving nature of political organization in the digital age.
If you're listening to this on your commute or while you're working, you might be wondering why you should care about a confidential manifesto mapping out the year 2050.
Right.
Because regardless of whether you are interested in macroeconomics, the history of decolonization, or just the sheer mechanics of modern digital grassroots movements, this document reveals exactly how modern technology, ancient philosophy, and brutal economic leverage might be combined to attempt the total re-engineering of historical power structures.
It really is a fascinating thought experiment turned into an operational reality.
It brings us back to that idea we started with. Usually, a blueprint defines the physical, finite borders of a building. But if a highly organized digital movement can successfully use a custom app to intercept and redirect $120 billion in global diaspora cash, acting as a coordinated economic sword to literally defund non-compliant national governments from an ocean away.
Which is just wild to think about.
It makes you wonder, in a hyper-connected world, does a physical border even mean anything anymore? Or does true sovereignty now belong exclusively to whoever controls the network?